Welcome back to the Purple Political Breakdown. How's it going? How's your day been? We are back at it again. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back to talk about some of the most important news topics of the weeks. I'll talk about the international conflicts regarding Donald Trump and America, the Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine, the two conflicts that have been dominating our international headlines for a very long time. I'll also go over the stuff regarding education that's underneath the radar that a lot of you guys don't really know about. Donald Trump's corrupt pardons that honestly, it really is no surprise at this point. And some stuff regarding the No Kings protest that you may not know in terms of how you can stay being involved with it and how you can continue pushing the movement of America does not want kings. Of course, we got a good news segment, so actual good things to look forward to that nobody really talks about besides this podcast. And I'm going to talk about the recent controversy in regards to the NBA players, the mafia. I know it's a kind of a crazy story. So this is a jam-packed episode, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, if you guys want to support what I do, if you want to support any of the organizations that I support, all those links are in the description for you guys to go check out. All you have to do for this podcast is like the YouTube video if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, and rate the podcast 5 stars. Without further ado, let's dive right into the nuanced news. So let's start off with the international conflicts. Will the ceasefire end? Will it last? It's only been like a week and some change, and there's a lot of fragility regarding it. So some of the important things to talk about. The U.S. brokered ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas took effect on October 10th, 2025, so about 15 days, so about 2 weeks and some change. It was negotiated by Trump, envoys in Egypt, requiring Hamas to release all remaining hostages and Israel to release approximately 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. However, at least 97 to 100 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire began, with Israel conducting massive airstrikes on October 19th, 9 days after this deal, which killed 42 people, claiming Hamas fighters attacked Israeli troops, which Hamas denied, saying they have no contact with fighters in Israeli-controlled areas. I said this before and I'll say it again, this conflict is super complicated, but one thing that you cannot deny is that ever since Israel backed out of the ceasefire deal in January or February, their actions have been very skeptical. It's been very unhinged, and it doesn't seem like that they are trying to advocate for peace. Now, different from far left and anti-Israel right-wingers, I am an individual that has been clearly defining that Hamas is a terrorist organization. They are terrible people. They do not need your sympathy. With that said, knowing the context of the situation, there's no way I can continue to not justify Israel's actions, but contextualize them to a way where you can at the very least see their point of view. There are very, very bad points where the nuance, the purple as this podcast spells out, it's no longer necessary. It's actually more harmful to try to humanize these terrible actions instead of treat them like they are. So Israel's far-right government, Netanyahu in particular, I don't know what they're thinking, and it really begs the question on whether or not this ceasefire will end. Now, I do not like giving Donald Trump credit, but you've listened to the podcast episode regarding the open panel where I was saying, hey, it got done. I understand the context. I understand there's more to it. I understand this is the framework based off Joe Biden's ceasefire deal. It got done. If this gets turned over on its head, will Donald Trump intervene? Now, I did see a tweet from a news source saying if the Israeli government and if Israel in general starts, encroaching on the West Bank, the United States may step in. I have to wait and see that. I really, really do. So, this is not good. Some more information to know. Israel identified bodies of hostage Ronan Engel and Thai national Santaya Okarasi on October 18th, with Hamas returning bodies of 8 to 13 deceased hostages so far, but claiming they need heavy digging equipment to find all captives, as some 10,000 Palestinians are also buried beneath rubble. The State Department reported credible information that Hamas was planning attacks on Palestinian civilians, with Trump warning that continued violence will result in U.S. military intervention against Hamas. So that is the other piece of the puzzle. Yes, they said that we will get involved if you encroach on the West Bank, but if the MAGA administration believed that Israel is somewhat justified in their attacks considering their friendly relationship, actual U.S. involvement into this conflict is an escalation that you can't say Joe Biden ever considered. You can't say Kamala Harris would ever have considered. So, American troops, or at the very least, military intervention, let me use the term that the MAGA administration is using, would be insane. And this all plays into the very simple fact that if you make Donald Trump look bad, he's going to crash out. He's going to crash out. Now, there is a couple of organizations that are not happy with Israel's actions. The International Court of Justice ruled Israel's under obligation to facilitate Gaza aid, adding international legal pressure for compliance with humanitarian provisions. The war has killed at least 67 to 68,000 Palestinians in Gaza since October 7, 2023, according to Gaza's health ministry, while Israel reports around 1,100 people died in the Hamas-led October 7th attacks. So the ICC has said quite a bit regarding this conflict the last 2 years, if you guys didn't know. Now, the ICC is a weird entity because it really only has jurisdictions for the areas that allow them in and has recognized their power, so to speak. That's the simplest way I could put it. Israel doesn't. So they really have no jurisdiction in Israel or to tell Israel what to do. It's kind of like the United States, that they probably wouldn't have any leverage on the United States either. With that said, considering Israel has agreed to a ceasefire deal and a lot of the other individuals involved are trying to help push this ceasefire deal along with all these other countries like Egypt, like Qatar. You definitely have to look at other countries like Saudi Arabia, some of the other UN European countries as well. If you want to be in the best gracious for a ceasefire, it requires peace and negotiation with all these countries if you're Israel. So the fact that Israel is knowing this and still is not really trying to play ball really begs the question their priorities. So yes, the ICC doesn't really have jurisdiction, but this is the time for peace. And if they're making claims that you're not doing what you should be doing regarding the humanitarian aid that you said you would do in the ceasefire, that it's not looking good for Israel. Some Ukraine-Russia stuff that I do want to touch upon as well. Oh, before I go into this last thing regarding international organizations. The UN humanitarian officials reported Gaza crossings were closed on October 14th and 15th, with Israel reducing aid quantities because Hamas hadn't returned all deceased hostages before partially reopening. The next stages face enormous challenges, including Hamas disarmament, Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, future governance of Gaza, basically the rest of the ceasefire deal. I broke it all down in the open panel podcast episode where we talked about the ceasefire deal in full. So that was Israel's justification. Now, regarding Ukraine, Russia, I don't have as much to say in regards to this, but I do think there's some important things to consider, especially in the next coming weeks. The U.S. imposed sanctions on Russia's two largest oil companies in October 2025, representing a significant escalation in economic pressure related to the Ukraine war. Additionally, the U.S. lifted key restrictions on Ukraine's use of Western long-range missiles, allowing strikes deeper into Russian territory and marking a major policy shift from previous limitations. Another thing to keep in mind is that there was going to be a conversation between Trump and Putin again, but for some reason it has been canceled. Why it has been canceled, we don't know. But Trump also has went out of his way to say Zelensky needs to play ball with Russia's deals or with Russia's demands more, and it seemed like he was capitulating to Putin a little bit. I said this to start out when regarding the Israel-Palestine conflicts. When it comes to Donald Trump, you got to play ball. If you make him look bad, he's gonna crash out. And this is a perfect example. Donald Trump tried to implore that he's this international peacemaker, that he was going to end this war in the first coming weeks of his presidency, that him and Putin went to Alaska, had a great conversation, and it's only a matter of time before we had peace in Ukraine and Russia. And all of that was a bunch of bullshit. Because we see when it comes down to Russia, it doesn't give two shits on what Donald Trump is saying. And Putin is just playing him like a fiddle, stringing him along, making him seem like the fool that he is. That way the conflict prolongs so Russia can continuously try to gain more and more territory, and while the United States keep Ukraine at bay. Now, Donald Trump is a very egotistical man, so this could be a situation where it backfires. Will that backfire involve something more drastic other than these sanctions? I don't know. Donald Trump is a very unpredictable individual, but again, this is something that we should pay attention to. Moving on to the next thing I want to talk about. Donald Trump pardons his corrupt friends. A little clickbaity. Not all of these guys, or there's only two guys that I'm talking about in particular as of the recent pardons. Not both of them are, honestly, I can't even say that. I do think you could argue both of them are, at the very least, very friendly with Donald Trump. Let's talk about the first individual, George Santos. Now, if you've listened to a past podcast episode I did on this platform, I've talked about how the moment George Santos got arrested for corruption, he was going to get pardoned or commutated, if you want to be, or commuted, if you want to use the legal proper term for it to make MAGA feel better. Ultimately, it's letting this guy out of jail, so I don't really care about the difference if I'm being completely honest. But when it happened and I found out that this guy is a Donald Trump dick sucker, I knew that this guy was going to get pardoned. So Trump commuted the 7-year prison sentence of former Rep. George Santos on October 17, 2025, releasing him immediately after serving just 3 months. 3 months. Despite Santos pleading guilty to wire fraud and aggravated identity theft, admitting to deceiving donors and stealing identities of 11 people to make campaign donations. Let me read that again if you guys did not hear what I just said. George Santos deceived donors and stolen identities of 11 people to make campaign donations. Trump's clemency eliminated not just Santos' prison time, but also his restitution obligations of $600,000, probation, supervised release, and all other conditions, with Trump justifying it by claiming Santos was horribly mistreated and have the courage, conviction. Let me do this justice. The courage, the conviction, and intelligence to always vote Republican. So basically, oh, you're loyal? Then I don't care if you're a corrupt politician. That is exactly what Donald Trump was doing here. Am I surprised? Fuck no, I'm not surprised. Is MAGA turning their back on some core principles that led them to support Trump in the first place? Of course, they're a bunch of hypocrites. One of the big things that Donald Trump and MAGA are using as a means to vote him into office is going after the corrupt politicians that were stealing money from the people, and for some reason they are turning a blind eye. No, not even turning a blind eye. They're taking their eyeballs and dousing them in bleach and taping their mouth shut as Donald Trump continues to pardon corrupt politician after corrupt politician after corrupt politician. People who have stolen money from their donors, stolen money from the people, they're getting pardoned. I don't know how many names I've said at this point. But if you're loyal to Donald Trump, then you're going to get pardoned. We really got to do something to fix this pardon system. Another individual to talk about is Changpeng Zhao, the former CEO of Binance, who was pardoned by Donald Trump as well. Trump granted clemency to Changpeng Zhao, the former CEO of Binance, who faced cryptocurrency fraud charges, with the pardon causing the crypto coin to spike in value and raising serious conflict of interest concerns. This pardon is part of Trump's broader pattern of granting clemency to wealthy allies and Republican politicians, including former Rep. Michael Grimm. In regards to this case in particular, I didn't put this down in my notes. I should have, in terms of what actually happened. So the reason why he got put in prison, and he was also fined for like millions of dollars, Binance and him individually, is because he and the company were being very lackadaisical when it comes to putting certain security measures and protections in place to prevent shady organizations to basically misuse the Binance platform. They were so focused on scaling up and gaining as much money as possible that those loose protections allowed the possibility of terrorist organizations, child abusers, just the worst of the worst individuals to come in the platform and misuse it any way they feel like it. And this misconduct is what got Zhao in trouble in the first place. You don't want your CEO, who has not only the ability to affect the market of consumer goods, but specifically in regards to something that affects your wallet, cryptocurrency, you don't want him to basically say, I don't care if people get scammed. I don't care if people come on the platform and do shady criminal deals, as long as I put more money in my pocket. It's a level of greed and selfishness that we have complained about billionaires for so long, and we see an example of some misconduct, and Donald Trump is like, you know what, I'm pardoning him. And you may be wondering why he pardoned him. What is Zhao's connection to Donald Trump? Well, it's very simple. Zhao, has been helping uplift and improve and rise the Trump family crypto business. That is the big selling point here. Zhao capitulated to help the Trump family corrupt crypto business, because that shit is fucking corrupt. I mean, we saw what he did with the meme coin. Do I need to say more? And because he helped with that, because he's helping with that, he got a pardon and got let out of prison. It's disgusting work, ladies and gentlemen. It's disgusting work. Moving on, what is next for the No Kings protest? It's a very important question because this was a very successful protest. I talked about it a little bit on my podcast already in terms of like my experience. I thought it was very good. I was able to talk to a lot of people, see where their heads are at. I wish I was there for longer so I can get a little bit more in the nitty gritty. And maybe in future circumstances, I'll create content out of these conversations. But with that said, there is people all over the world that was also participating in this protest, not in just my area. Chicago, DC, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, like people were peacefully, that's the key word, peacefully protesting. To kind of give you more information on the scale of what is going on and the response of what is going on, An estimated 7 million people participated in the No Kings protest on October 18th, 2025, which held more than 2,700 cities across 50 U.S. states, marking the largest single day protest in American history. That's a huge achievement. 2 million more than the first No Kings protest in June 2025. Major turnouts included 250,000 in Chicago, 200,000 in Washington, D.C., 100,000 plus across New York City's 5 boroughs, with protests reaching every congressional district, including deep red Trump voting areas, demonstrating unprecedented geographic breadth. Huge, very huge. It's showing that people are caring with the protests out there. That advocacy, that message that is appealing to also the non-political voters is valuable. You got to showcase exactly how terrible Donald Trump is on a consistent basis. We don't want to live in a world where it's too late. I don't think anybody wants to live in that world. And Trump responded in very unique ways, him and MAGA. Trump released an AI generated video showing himself in a crown, dropping brown liquid. Brown liquid on protesters using Kenny Loggins' danger zone without permission. Loggins also demanded removal from that and posted images of himself and VP JD Vance wearing crowns on social media. Republicans condemned the movement as hate America rallies, with Senator Ted Cruz claiming George Soros funded the protests and urging use of the RICO Act to prosecute organizers for supporting rioting and violence, despite protests being overwhelmingly peaceful with 0 arrests in major cities. The Republicans are crashing out. I think the mirror is very clearly reflecting how evil they are at this point. And the response from the president of the United States of America is an AI video of him pooping on people. That is where we live in 2025. That is the leader of the free world, the most powerful man in the world. That's how he acts. It's so degenerate, so immature. It's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. I don't really need to say much more about it, do I? Other things to keep in mind. The movement built substantial infrastructure through over 25,000 people attending ACLU-led Know Your Rights training sessions, distributing 3 million rights cards in English and Spanish, and establishing weekly calls to action through the No Kings Alliance. Organizers emphasized that while 7 million people or 7 million participants represent significant progress toward the 3.5% threshold research suggests can topple authoritarian regimes, success requires sustained local organizing, with upcoming actions including Healthcare Heist National Week of Action. Some of these events already happened, so there's really no point in me bringing them up. But they also recommend that a lot of people go on their website and get involved by contacting your local politician, your local senator, your governor, it doesn't really matter who, and really show them that they need to keep up the fight. Specifically, Democrats and some Republicans too actually have balls, and even female balls. Keep up the fight. Do not let the government shutdown have MAGA take control of the narrative. Do this to help the people. It sucks. People are not getting paid for sure. But this is fully a thing that is necessary to not only showcase the power of the people, but also helping the people. They're trying to do this to ensure that premiums don't go up for healthcare, specifically for Medicaid for Americans. And not only that, who knows what else they can do as well. So it's important for them to keep up the fight, no matter how long it takes. So before I move on to our next segment, last thing I want to talk about is education. I do think it is under attack. The education, ever since the Department of Education went down, it just seemed like Donald Trump is trying to do his best to terrify educators and educational institutions to do things his way. I probably should have had a segment talking about how he's trying to do the same thing for media organizations, considering that a good chunk of them did not sign the petition to basically fall in line. And now the only people who have like press passes to the White House are MAGA propaganda tools. It's wild. It's wild. So some things to note. Trump announced a college university compact in October 2025, impacting major institutions including UVA, MIT, and Dartmouth as part of his broader attack on higher education targeting institutions he perceives as promoting liberal or woke ideologies. This follows Trump's pattern of threatening universities' federal funding and tax-exempt status unless they comply with his administration's ideological preferences on issues like DEI programs, protest policies, and curriculum content. A UT Austin professor was dismissed from administrative duties specifically for ideological differences, representing a concerning trend of academic freedom violations in public university. This case exemplifies how Trump's education policies are leading to direct retaliation against faculty members whose views don't align with the administrative political agenda. So, one of the best ways for you to create authoritarian regime that is capitulating to the dictator is controlling information, and taking another level, controlling education. If you can mold the young generation as they grow up, if you can manipulate them, create a different narrative, then you can just have people growing up full-blown MAGA Nazis. It's an effective strategy because their morality is skewed. It's not really tested in terms of what it means to be human and empathetic to your fellow human. Or even something as simple as being like Christ, and how certain principles behind who Jesus Christ is someone that cares about people suffering, someone that will go out of his way to wash a poor person's foot, die for your sins, sacrifice himself. MAGA doesn't uphold Christ-like principles anymore, and they can utilize the education system to create an army of brainwashed individuals. Something to note. So education and how it's being attacked is very important to keep in mind. But with that said, I do want to move on to the next segment, because this stuff regarding the NBA, regarding Chauncey Billups, that's crazy. So let's dive a little deeper. So, what is going on? NBA players and mafia gambling scheme. Wild. Wild stuff, ladies and gentlemen. And not something that was on my to-do list, or at the very least on my wish list of 2025. Dude, we know that there was always like things behind the table, money given behind the table. I mean, Pablo Torre consistently proving how corrupt some of these organizations and billionaires are, because this is the game that's supposed to be the best teams, the best athletes win. But if you're going underneath the table to circumvent the rules in place, then there's really no ethical way to play the game, right? With that said, This is more than just the game. This is just using your name, your influence, your power to fool and manipulate people. Chauncey Billups. Let's talk about it. So, federal authorities announced sweeping charges against Trailblazers head coach, or former Trailblazers head coach, Chauncey Billups, and Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier in two interconnected illegal gambling cases. The first involved a rigged poker network backed by mafia families, and the second centered on insider betting using confidential NBA information. The Justice Department described the indictment as part of a massive nationwide takedown involving 34 total defendants. Crazy. NBA is also looking pretty good. I've been watching a little bit of a tangent. I've been paying attention. The teams that I'm following this year, personally, is the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm a Luka Doncic fan, and the Golden State Warriors, like Steph Curry. I will New York Knicks too. I am a fan of Jalen Brunson. I like Cat. I think. Should I get another East team? Is there another one that I really care about? Not really. Those are probably the three teams I'm gonna watch the most. Might tune in here and there for like the San Antonio. Oh, actually, I like the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm rooting for Giannis. I think Giannis is great. So this was going to be a very good season of basketball. But with the Kawhi Leonard thing and with this, it's really not looking good for the or for the league's credibility. And I don't even have to mention the corrupt lottery of the Dallas Mavericks getting the first overall pick. That was beyond corrupt. There is no way you can sell me that was not rigged. So, Billups was charged with wire fraud and money laundering conspiracy for allegedly helping to legitimize poker games secretly controlled by members of the Bonanno, Gambino, and Genovese crime families. These high-stake games reportedly use rigged shuffling machines, marked cards, and X-ray technology to guarantee wins for organizers. Prosecutors say the scheme defrauded victims of at least $7 million since 2019, and games hosted in locations like Las Vegas, the Hamptons, and Miami. Rozier's charges stem from a separate but overlapping betting operation in which he and others allegedly passed non-public injury and lineup information to co-conspirators. That inside data was then used to place large bets through legal and offshore sports books, including a $200,000 wager tied to a 2023 game when Rozier exited early due to a supposed injury. His lawyers maintains Rozier's innocence, claiming the government relied on unreliable sources and that he was previously cleared by the NBA. Now, both men have been brought in, immediate leave from the NBA, and there's also more like not clear evidence, but very interesting coincidences with like Chauncey Billups pulling people out of certain NBA games, Terry Rozier all of a sudden playing like dog water. If this game, which is $1 million industry, is not something where the best players win, what's the point? What's the point? Like, don't get me wrong, scripted television is great as well. I like the WWE, I like anime, but this is a different niche. There's a certain love for the idea of anything can happen. Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier. We'll see how everything plays out. But as of right now, they are cooked. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, let's end the podcast episode with some pleasant news, because that situation is insane. I think Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier are cooked, and I don't want gambling in the NBA. It does spark up a bigger conversation in terms of gambling in general, and I'm like not anti-gambling, but I do like sports bet here and there. But I am considering the validity of certain activities and whether they should be consistently broadcasted and advertised in front of people's face. I have a I'm looking at the landscape of influence, right? And some of the biggest influences in society today are influencers. And some of them I really like, but some of them take sports gambling sponsorships, Blue Chew sponsorships. Some of them feed into the sexual perversion of men's desperation. And I go like, is the way we are pushing certain goods that are guaranteed moneymakers, one of the best ways to get money is feed on people's addictions and feed on people's innate instincts. There's something a little wrong with that, don't you think? I've already had issues with influencers in general because I do think a lot of them have so much influence and impact, but they don't use that influence or impact in a positive way. I would argue just because they entertain doesn't mean that they can have positive influence. I think that's a ridiculous notion. The people who say that I'm not a role model, I think that is lazy. There's no way you can gain so much money, so much influence from a large mass of people and say that you're not a role model at this point. That's not how it works. Role models are not chose or role models is not something becoming a role model is not something you can just do. It's something that you are basically, I don't know, is chosen for the right term. It's either something you are or something you're not. People influence people all the time, but a role model is someone that influences a large group of people, impacts society on its head. So I do think there is an interesting conversation there, and I might have that more impactful conversation at a later time. With that said, I do want to end on a good note. The good the media doesn't tell you. Before we get in that, I do want to shout out the Alive Network.
I do apologize for interrupting this great podcast episode, but I have a question for you. Did you know you can support this show by downloading and becoming a member of the Alive Podcast Network app? You'll experience unlimited access to Black-hosted content, and we'll be able to keep bringing you amazing content week after week. If you enjoy what I'm doing, then I'm sure you're going to enjoy a bunch of other creators as well by downloading this app, of course. So without further ado, after you're done watching and being entertained with today's news or conversation, make sure you guys go download the Alive Network app now.
So there is some good news that I want to give you guys. One of the big ones is how heart rate deaths are going down. So here's the story. Death rates from heart disease, once the leading cause of death worldwide, have declined significantly over the past 2 decades. This progress is largely due to medical advances such as better cholesterol, blood pressure treatment, as well as public health campaigns promoting exercise and smoking cessation. Experts also credit greater awareness of diet, sleep, and stress management. In short, millions of lives are being saved each year because both individuals and health systems are investing in prevention and healthier living. And I stuttered a little quick. This sentence, let me read my notes. It's a quiet but powerful victory for global health. Sometimes I have to read my notes to kind of progress the show along, so I have some bullet points right next to me. So that's a big thing. Shout out, heart rate deaths are going down. I heard some stuff regarding cancer that might be impactful as well, so we'll see how that plays out. But regardless of how much RFK Jr. wants to ruin the healthcare system and ruin the people, there's still positive things to look at. Hey, sorry. This is the good the media doesn't tell you. I don't need to be negative. Only positive thinking. A new NOAA study has found that global sea turtle populations are rebounding after decades of decline caused by poaching, pollution, and overfishing, thanks to conservation efforts like protected nesting beaches, reducted by catch and fishing nets, and international laws such as the Endangered Species Act. Many turtle species are thriving again. What's equally inspiring is how public perception has shifted. Coastal communities that once hunted turtles now protect them for ecotourism and cultural pride. While challenges remain for species like the leatherback, this story proves that determined conservation and changing human values can help nature recover. And I 100% agree to that. I wonder if anybody's seen a leatherback turtle. Those things are huge. Across the U.S., every day, compassion is making headlines. In Kansas, a taco shop's card reader broke down, leaving a family unable to pay until a stranger quietly stepped in, covering their meal and tipping the staff. His act went viral, earning him a year of free tacos. Meanwhile, in Michigan, a high school volleyball team learned that their beloved custodian, Abel Rodriguez, didn't have a car. The students rallied the entire community to raise $9,000, surprising him with a vehicle, insurance, and gas money. Over 100 people cheered as Abel called it the happiest drive home of his life. These stories are proof that generosity still moves forward for people more than greed, and that's a fact. I do think we need more of these good stories because I do think these are things that people want to see, but it just doesn't get the clicks. The negativity gets clicks. But shout out this guy. Shout out the people who are supporting someone that's part of the community. Community is so powerful in terms of living the best life you can live, and creating change in the area that you're living in. Scientists at the University of British Columbia have developed the mycotoilet, a water-class composting system powered by mushroom mycelium, the root network of fungi. This invention separates liquids and solids using natural fungal processes to break down waste, eliminates 90% of odor, and generate nutrient-rich soil and liquid fertilizer. Each unit can produce hundreds of liters of compost annually without polluting water systems. Beyond the technology, the project reimagines sanitation as part of a circular ecosystem where human waste becomes a resource instead of a problem. It's an elegant fusion of ecology, design, and sustainability. That's huge. There are so many ways we can make great technology, such as this one, that is a cycle of better things, right? This technology is using fungi and turning something that is, nobody wants poop, right? Nobody wants piss, but you can use that as fertilizer, which is very important for plant life, right? Another person I've talked to in my podcast episode before talked about how they're creating a paint that absorbs carbon dioxide in the atmosphere because it inputted fungi inside the paint, and it's completely healthy, completely fine. So, or fungi or some type of other plant-based substance. So it just shows you there are things that we can create to help people. Just for example, that one black kid that is creating a technology that can convert plastic waste into gasoline. And what makes his a little bit different from other technology like that is it's solar powered. So this just shows you that people can create some great things. And the last great thing, around the world, AI and clean technology are delivering real benefits beyond Silicon Valley headlines. AI-enabled heart monitors can now detect irregular rhythms and send real-time alerts to doctors before a cardiac event happens, giving patients crucial extra minutes to get help. In seismically active regions, AI-powered seismographs are offering earlier earthquake warnings than ever before, saving lives and reducing damage. At the same time, solar-powered streetlights and community wind farms are transforming rural life, making neighborhoods safer, cleaner, and energy dependent. These are great innovations. These are very important. Yes, AI has its issues. Trust me, it does. I've talked about it plenty. But there is some very good way AI can be used to help society. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, that is all I got for today's podcast episode. Hopefully you got a lot of great information. If you did, rate the podcast 5 stars and share with your friends and family. Without further ado, you have a good one. Take care.